Where's everybody at? Vice Chair. We have a quorum. Not yet. Oh, I couldn't see who that. Yep.
Oh, you got 2 minutes.
I brought my own stylus. Where are the other 7 at? We're going to go ahead and bring to order our November 6th Budget and Finance Committee meeting. If there isn't any objection, I would like to move RS 2017-910 to the end of the agenda. Is there any objection? Seeing none, we're going to proceed with our next resolution, which is RS 2017-920, sponsors Virgin Roberts, approves 2 grants between the United States Department of Justice and the Metro Nashville Police Department that will govern the participation of DEA Nashville District Office Task Force participants in the United States Department of Justice Equitable Sharing Program. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. RS 2017-926, sponsors Virgin Roberts, approves an agreement between the United States Department of Justice and the Metro Police Department to provide police assistance to the Middle Tennessee Drug Enforcement Task Force. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Council Lady Allen.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. This may have been a question for the previous one. It was called equitable sharing, but I have a memory of it being like a 10% sharing. I mean, what's meant by equitable? If I can ask.
Police here. We have our finest coming up to the lectern. Please state your name and title for the viewing audience.
Captain Mike Alexander with the Specialized Investigation Division with the Metro Police Department. And in response to your question, as a general rule, it is a 10% equitable sharing agreement. I have seen it as high as 15% on cases that we're directly involved in. Kind of depends on, everything's analyzed pretty much in depth in terms of personnel hours from our department involved in those investigations, how much time is spent, how much personnel is spent. But in general, it's a 10% equitable sharing agreement. Yes, ma'am.
And then I guess this is maybe more relevant to the current one that we're talking about. What are the criteria for seizing assets, and if the person from whom they're seized is later proven to be not guilty, are they returned?
Well, again, it's hard to speak to the end result of every case because circumstances are different in every single case. Obviously, state law already establishes what's allowed to be seized, in terms of property, how much drugs are involved, and things of that nature are already established by existing law. I will say that if the police department is found to be per se in error in terms of a seizure that has occurred, then there are already established sanctions in place up to and including the police department being liable for attorney's fees and restitution in that nature of paying attorney fees, returning properties, and things of that nature, should we be found to be in error. Yes, ma'am. So there are several checks and balances in place that are established well beyond the police department to analyze each one of those cases.
Thank you. And then this is federal DEA, but you're saying that state law covers what's allowed to be seized. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that explanation.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Councilman Pulley, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam President.
You're on.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you define can you give us a smattering of what kind of cases this task force does work?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. The primary goal of us being involved with the DEA is the seizure of heroin and fentanyl, especially considering today's epidemic that I think touches the entire country, and obviously Nashville is no exception to that. And just to give you a general idea, as of October the 3rd, Davidson County has experienced 189 fatal drug overdoses of our citizens. As far as the country, a little over 64,000. So we're talking about 175 people a day that are dying from fatal overdoses, a lot of those that do involve heroin. To point to a particular case, like you mentioned, sir, we recently worked with the DEA and we seized 5 pounds of heroin. Further analysis of that heroin actually showed that 25% of that heroin contained fentanyl, which is a very deadly substance in addition to the heroin. So to put that in perspective, that 5 pounds of heroin that had 25% fentanyl mixed in with it, that's enough to cause potentially up to 100,000 fatal overdoses of people that take that. So we have several cases where we have taken large amounts of heroin and fentanyl working in conjunction with the DEA, and what that allows us to do in terms of furthering our investigations to make them more significant. And when I say more significant, I mean allows us to get to the next level supplier that may be bringing a more significant amount of heroin and fentanyl into our community. So that's why this relationship is so very important. We're battling the fatal heroin overdose epidemic here in Nashville, just like every other major city is experiencing.
Is it fair to say 100% of the cases you work on are drug-related?
Yes, sir. In that relationship between ourselves and the DEA, yes, sir, that would be a fair statement.
We've all heard extreme cases of how civil asset forfeiture was used to do things like seize money from someone who showed up at the airport with a pot full of cash headed to Houston. Are those the kind of asset forfeitures we're talking about in this task force?
In this particular agreement between our department and this task force, no, sir, it's not. And I can tell you, Detective Mark Anderson is the task force officer that is a Metro Nashville police officer, but he has been assigned to the DEA task force for approximately the last 4 years. And they have never seized any money during the last 4 years that has not resulted in an arrest while he's been a member of the DEA task force. So again, the heroin and the fentanyl is the primary goal. Obviously, if the law allows money that's tied to that heroin and fentanyl to be seized, then obviously we will follow the proper protocol to do that. But it's always resulted in an arrest. Some of those stories that you may see about other places, I can't speak to. But again, there are several checks and balances in our system here in our city to ensure that we're doing this the right way.
And don't you believe that asset forfeiture is a critical part of the deterrence for these kind of crimes? Because typically, isn't it fruits from these ill-gotten gains that you're going after?
Yes, sir. It's always ultimately proven to be that case. Once it moves through the court system, that evidence is put on, and it's deemed to be the result, of ill-gotten proceeds in terms of the drug trade. So, in terms of furthering those investigations, I think we all realize that the drug trafficking, if you will, the drug seller, that's not a typical, 8 to 5 sort of Monday through Friday day. So, those assets become very productive in terms of calling our people out in the middle of the night or during the weekend to further a drug investigation that can occur at all hours of the day or night. But again, the amount of heroin and fentanyl that we're continually taking off the street before it reaches our Nashville neighborhoods is why this relationship is so very important to our city, I believe.
I have a couple of more very quick questions. What's a typical length of one of these investigations?
It varies. They're not necessarily short-term investigations because obviously we try to go to the next level in several of our investigations between us and the DEA to include large amounts of drugs that are coming in from other states and maybe even out of the country. If I had to put an average on it, I would say most are 5 to 6 month investigations before they ultimately culminate. So it's by far a scenario where we're running out with a knee-jerk reaction and making an arrest within a week. There's a lot of time and effort put into these cases in order to seize the most heroin and fentanyl that we possibly can when it does conclude.
How long have we been involved in this task force?
Actually, we've worked in conjunction with the DEA for almost 30 years.
And could you give me an idea of what the department does with the money that we get from this equitable sharing program?
Yes, sir. One of the main things we do, again, is pay our officers the necessary overtime to come in at Saturday at 2 a.m. when we received information that a large amount may be getting close to our city during the course of one of our investigations. So overtime costs for those officers, obviously basic equipment that the detectives need to do their job, but also, again, to further those investigations to get to several next levels. Again, this is not street-level drug sales that this particular unit and this partnership involves. These are organizations that are literally bringing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds of illegal drugs into our city from other states and even out of the country. So obviously that takes resources to keep furthering those investigations to try to get those to the next level. Obviously training, our training, I kind of compare it to technology. It's hard to stay abreast of the most current types of the most effective kind of training for our officers to safely do their job. So we do use some of those assets to send our officers to the best training that we think is available, especially in terms of heroin and fentanyl. Fentanyl is very deadly, and that applies to our detectives as well. It becomes airborne. Even to fentanyl being touched can become deadly to someone. Obviously, we equip our officers with Narcan now to give us the opportunity to save somebody's life that may have overdosed. So between personnel costs that it takes to further these investigations, getting those investigations to the next level, providing adequate training from a safety perspective to ultimately get the most heroin and fentanyl off of the street before it reaches our neighborhoods would be the majority of what those assets are used for.
Thank you, Captain. I have nothing further, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain.
Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. RS 2017-939 sponsors Virtue, Bettany, and others, authorizes the Director of Public Property to purchase various flood-prone properties for Metro Water Services. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. RS 2017-940, sponsors Virture, Elrod, and others, approves a contract between the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency and Metro Water Sewage Services to utilize unused funds to complete the purchase and removal of 11 previously identified properties, including vacant lots located in various floodway and floodplain areas. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. RS 2017-941, sponsors Virture, Elrod, and others, approves a contract between the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency and Metro Water Sewage Services to utilize unused funds from a grant previously approved to complete the purchase and removal of 15 previously identified properties, including vacant lots in various floodways and floodplain areas. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. RS 2017-942, sponsors Virture, Bettany, and Hager, appropriates $1,184,684 for a grant to the Metro Planning Commission from the Tennessee Department of Transportation for fiscal years 2018 through 2020. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. RS 2017-943, sponsors Virture, Roten, and others, approves an application for the 440 Greenway Tiger 9 grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation to the Metro Board of Parks and Recreation to construct the 440 Greenway from Melrose, Battlemont Park to Sevier Park and Park Plaza to Boyd Park. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. RS 2017-944, sponsors Virture and Roten, approves a grant from the Tennessee State Library and Archives to the Metro Nashville Public Library to target library materials to persons having difficulty using a library and to provide special services to children and young people. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. RS 2017-945, sponsors Virture and Roten, approves a grant from the Tennessee State Library and Archives to the Metro Nashville Public Library to provide funds to purchase computers for use by the library patrons and staff to enhance the use of technology services available at the public library. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. RS 2017-946, sponsors Virture and Roberts, approves an application for the 2017 Homeland Security Grant from the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency to Metro Governments. There a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Vice Chair Schulman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question. I'm looking at the analysis. Looks like if the grant application is approved, proceeds would be used to fund costs related to Homeland Security preparedness activities. Is there somebody who can explain exactly what that is?
We have the Office of Emergency Management.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. Those items are totaling to about $173,154, and they are things like defense armor, helmets, hydraulic power tools, tactical entry equipment, electric power tools, GoPro Heroes, rolling tool cabinets, atmospheric monitors, non-sparking tool sets. The biggest one is the area array monitor, ASA field test, satellite for comms trailers, and active shooting training.
So is that broken out some way so that we actually know what the money actually goes to?
Well,
is it broken out by?
I can leave you with this.
It's broken out by actual numbers as well?
Yes.
Okay. I think that would be helpful just to see what and is this an application for a grant?
Yes, it's already been approved.
It's already been approved. So this money, when we send up the application, we actually say what we're going to spend it for?
Yes.
And I understand there were it sounds like a lot of power tools?
Yes. But the biggest line item is the area ray monitor and the active shooter training.
Okay. So, yeah, Madam Chair, if we could just get a copy of that, that would be helpful, and just pass it out to the members of the committee. All right, thank you.
Duly noted, Vice Chair. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. RS 2017-947 sponsors Vircher and Roberts, approves a grant from the Tennessee Department of Safety and Homeland Security to the Metro Nashville Police Department for the continuance of the Enhanced DUI Enforcement Initiative to reduce traffic fatalities attributed to impaired drivers through aggressive enforcement. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. RS 2017-948 sponsors Vircher, approves a grant from the Tennessee Department of Safety and Homeland Security to the Metro Government Drug Court Program to undertake alcohol countermeasures and highway safety projects to reduce the number of driving under the influence cases in Tennessee. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. RS 2017-949 sponsor Vircher, approves a grant from the Davidson County Mental Health and Veterans Court Assistance Foundation to the Davidson County General Sessions Court to supplement employee salaries and assist in providing direct assistance to the Veterans Treatment Court participants. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. RS 2017-950 sponsors Vircher, approves a grant from the Comcast Foundation to the Metro Finance Department to improve our communities by painting and cleaning schools, landscaping, public gardens, stocking food banks, and other services to make a positive difference in the community. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. RS 2017-951 sponsors Vircher and Elrod, approves an application for an education and outreach grant from the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation to the Metro Public Works to increase curbside recycling and participation in Nashville. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Vice Chair? No. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. RS 2017-952 sponsors Vircher, appropriate funds from the United States Department of Health and Human Services to the Metro Action Commission to support the Head Start program by funding a comprehensive child development program for disadvantaged children and approving amendments 1 and 2 to the grant contract. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. RS 2017-953 sponsors Vircher, approves an amendment to the contract between the Tennessee Department of Health and Metro Board of Health to provide medical examiner investigations, postmortem examinations, and consultations. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. RS 2017-954 sponsors Vircher, approves a contract between the Metro Board of Health and Monroe Harding to hire one part-time administrative assistant for the Adverse Childhood Experiences Nashville Initiative. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Now we have bills on second reading. Bill 2017-912 sponsors Schulman, amends the Metro Code to require the Metro Social Services Commission to open a Metro-operated facility at night to people in Nashville when temperatures reach 32 degrees Fahrenheit or below. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Councilman Pulley.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Is there anyone here from the Social Services Commission that could speak to this?
Hi, good evening.
Hey, thank you very much. Could you tell us what your position is on this bill?
I'm Judy Tackett. I'm the director of the Metropolitan Homelessness Commission, which is housed
Judy,
under...
can you speak into the microphone, please?
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. Judy Tackett, director of the Metropolitan Homelessness Commission. We're housed under Metro Social Services. The position on this bill, as it's written, it potentially creates barriers.
Creates barriers for you? Can you explain that to us?
Yeah. I have gotten some feedback from some of the Metro partners, Metro Parks, and Metro Legal has also weighed in. There is also a fiscal note that is probably going to extend it. They're because of their extended budgets, if they have to open way more, they're not sure how much of those services that they can provide that they're absorbing in their current budgets right now. And from Metro Legal, there's probably a liability issue if you open 150 beds at this length of time that this could promote. Okay. So I don't have any details yet, though.
The bill intends to, as I understand the bill, it intends to open your shelter at 32 degrees instead of 25 degrees. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any evidence to support the fact that we are not serving the population who needs that service?
This is not a yes or no. This is where the complexity comes in. There are people that have barriers or do not enter the existing shelter beds, and that's why the community has come together beyond Metro and has actually approached Metro to step in for overflow sheltering. From a bed capacity and from a data perspective, we have looked at data last year. There are, on any given night, last year, between 30 and 40 people that would utilize a shelter like that are not known to Room and Inn and the Mission, which are the existing shelter systems.
I lost my train of thought. Do you... I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought, so I'm finished.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Henderson.
Thank you, Chair Vercher. I guess what I was wanting to understand is it seems that you all have worked so diligently to have a whole network of community partners to respond to this need, that you all have done a lot of strategic planning over the years to make that run smoothly. And this seems to be quite a departure from what you've been building towards. So I appreciate us wanting to serve that community and do that at a higher or lower or trigger of 32 rather than 25. But my impression is that, you're talking about a cohort of 30 or 40 people who you feel to be underserved in that range, but could they be accommodated in the partner churches and other facilities if they so desired? Or can you speak to that just a little more fully?
The group came together last week, and so actually that was really good. Some of it triggered by this bill, and discussed this with some certain different resources. So they are willing to they need more time to come together and have more discussions around what could happen if there were more resources that would go to the private sector to have some alternative sheltering around 32 degrees. So they're willing to come together, have further meetings. I reached out to them this afternoon, and we're scheduling another meeting, actually a follow-up meeting, regardless of what happens here, to continue the conversation and what needs to happen to get people indoors.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I guess with that, Chair Vercher, could we ask the sponsor if he, given that conversation that his good effort here has sparked, does he intend to defer this bill to wait for those conversations to happen, or could I inquire about that, please?
Councilman Schulman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Council Lady, for your question. At this point, I do not intend to defer. I deferred already one meeting. This issue is not going to go away. It's been floating around for several years. We had discussions about this 2 years ago, and I had discussions about it last year. I just checked my my phone, and it's going to be 36 degrees, I think, this weekend. So I don't want to put this off. I think we need to start moving by passing this, by getting it on second hearing. I'm still waiting to hear from the group to see if they can come up with a plan. But we put it off, and I think we're just delaying for no reason. It's going to get cold. We've known this issue has been out there for the last year, and we still don't have a plan to deal with this. Now, I will tell you that there is a community outreach plan, but, and I can go into all of it. At this point, last year, when I did canvassing myself, we were never told what facility Metro was going to open until like 8 o'clock or 8:30 or 9 o'clock. The plan on the website is not up to date. I understand there was a mention about concern about the fiscal note. We tried to give money to social services this year in the appropriations bill, and we were told that they could live with it within their existing resources. You know, if we can, we're getting ready to act on a big, giant soccer measure that's going to obligate the city to spend lots of money. Surely we can open up one of our buildings that's heated at night to take care of people who are outside in the cold. And if it's 32 degrees or below, that's freezing. I don't think we're asking too much. I think the purpose of government is to deal with those people who are in need. We can do the nice stuff, and I understand that, but I just don't think we need to be leaving people outside when it's freezing outside. We can open up a building. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Council Lady Henderson, did you have further comment?
Yes, I had further questions, Chair Vercher. Mr. Jameson, I know it seems the fiscal note was not fully kind of developed. It didn't have all the information. I know Mr. Curl was looking at some additional information. Can you speak to that? Because I know there's a general sense that it would require more budgeting, but have we really drilled down on how much more that cost is? How many nights we are indeed above, or rather below 32, and what that would mean, as Ms. Tackett alluded to with the other partners like parks and otherwise, please.
That's correct. So presumably this would require additional staffing during those nights. And that additional staffing, the extent of the staffing and the frequency is not determined yet. Typically a bill that has a financial implication, any expenditure required, before it's placed on the agenda, it goes to finance for them to determine those sorts of questions. In this instance, as Councilman Schulman alluded to, during the operating budget discussions, social services purportedly stated that they could handle this within their existing budget. So it did not go through that usual process, but we still don't have that final figure from social services. My understanding from Councilman Schulman, who I hope will correct me if I'm wrong, is that he is waiting to meet with them to determine what that specific figure is, among other items.
So I guess my question would be, Chair Lady Vercher, not having that financial information to know what fiscal implications are, is it appropriate to pass it here and then re-refer it to Budget and Finance once we have that information?
She'll make it.
That's an appropriate motion.
Would the sponsor entertain that motion?
So thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'm always happy to bring it back. I would correct one thing that Mr. Jameson said, and our former budget chair is here. We did try to push an amendment to get them more money this past year. During the budget discussions, we understood. I don't know if it came from social services, but it came from somewhere in the budget office or someone looking at the budget office that they could absorb it. That's why I never pushed the amendment. Otherwise, if I had been told, I mean, just go back to the basis of government, or the basic part of what government does. If I understood that if they couldn't absorb it, then that would have been the primary amendment that I would have pushed. So we were told that they could absorb the cost. So that's why the bill has been floating through, because there is no fiscal impact. They can absorb it. Now, if there is one, that leads to all kinds of different questions, particularly do we not have money to take care of this in light of the fact that we've got other major things we're getting ready to do, maybe even tonight and tomorrow. So I am happy to go ahead and try to pass it tonight, refer it back to this committee. But at some point, we got to understand that we're trying to protect people, our own citizens, from freezing to death outside. And that we should have plenty of money for. All right? But I am willing to move it tonight and go ahead and pass it, try to pass it tomorrow night, and then refer it back to Budget Committee if that's what the committee would like to do.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you.
Oh, that was a motion? Second. I'm sorry, Vice Chair, I was up here. We still had some discussion in the queue. Council Lady Allen.
Thank you. Mr. Jameson, can you tell me if this is amendable on third reading, or if we have amendments, we need to make them happen on second reading?
You can amend on third with suspension of the rules, but ordinarily, because this is not a Title 17 or a tax measure, it would be amended on second.
That would be preferable. Okay. I mean, it seems like some of what I'm hearing is that perhaps when the group meets, they may come up with other suggestions. I mean, one of the barriers that I had heard was that some people simply don't do well in a facility with 150 people. So perhaps opening a facility with 150 people might keep out the very people, or some of the very people we're trying to help, and perhaps a smaller facility opening at 32 at 50 would be better. You know, and then we open something at 25 that's larger. I mean, it seems like there are some adjustments that could be made that may work within the budget, possibly if they're scaled more to what the actual need is. So I think I would support a deferral so that we could continue to make amendments if we can do that and make this be the bill that actually serves the people in the best way possible.
It's not a real motion.
Which maybe, and I'm saying I don't support the current amendment. I mean, motion. I support an out-and-out deferral. I mean, my research in the weather data is that they're about 40 days below 42, and we had 10 days below 25. So it would quadruple last year's cost to $25,000, and that's if you don't add more people. And I think last year they had maybe 90 people in the shelter as opposed to 150. So that could be significantly more. It just seems to me like a little bit more discussion with the groups on how we actually can make sure people are safe at 32 degrees in a way that addresses the barriers that they're dealing with might make this a better bill, and then a little bit more time might help that to happen better.
We currently still have council members in the queue on the motion that's on the floor. Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Chair. So I just want to understand something. We're debating Mr. Jameson, the cost on this is approximately what per night if we open this up?
We don't have that figure yet.
But what's our guesstimate? Because I heard stuff on news, and I don't want to throw it out there, but do we have a guesstimate of what it might be?
I see Ms. Tackett has risen, so she may have a suggested answer.
Yeah, so we have reached out to other Metro departments, so the Metro cost is just under $8,000 a night.
So about $8,000 a night. So, and this is where my confusion falls. We're debating deferring something on $8,000 cost, but yet we're probably going to pass something that's going to be, let's just call it $4 million a year to the taxpayers in just a bit that we talk about. And so normally I would agree, but we're debating about, do we defer this until we have all the answers? Well, I'm just asking us to remember the conversation we're having right now when we have this conversation about something larger later this evening. So, Chair, thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, Councilman. Up, I knocked you off. Councilman O'Connell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think on this particular bill and on this particular issue, it's a very, it highlights sometimes the challenge of when heart meets head. And what we've got here is, and I am one of 3 members of this body that have served on the commission since we all took office a couple of years ago, the Homelessness Commission in particular, where we've grappled with this, and it's a very, very difficult issue. I don't think there's a member of the body, I don't think there's a member of the commission that thinks we're doing our best effort if anybody is ever left out in the cold under any circumstance, right? The point has been raised a number of times in the commission, the discrepancy when advisories go out in the community about when to bring your pets in from the cold, et cetera. The challenge is just opening the doors to the public library or this very building mean that as soon as we pass this bill, now Metro Legal gets involved. There are a lot of liability issues. It might involve security issues, et cetera. This bill, the framework of this bill in terms of the simplicity of it is, the simplicity is wonderful, but the issues, unfortunately, are very real. Councilor Allen already spoke to one of those, which is how big populations grow, whether they're safe, appropriate, et cetera. I think one of the issues that has been raised by a number of the advocates that would like to see the city do more here is that not all of the sheltering options available under the current cold weather community response plan are sufficiently low barrier. That means that, for instance, couples showing up together might be separated. People showing up with pets might be asked to separate from their animals and wonder whether or not appropriate shelter will be provided. Those are all problems we absolutely do need to solve. I think the biggest question here that we're trying to solve apparently in a single reading on this issue is whether or not Metro should in fact be in the sheltering game. And if we should, I would suggest that this particular bill is insufficient for that purpose. It tasks one specific department with no regard to how Metro Social Services currently, besides the fiscal impact, does not have facility authority to coerce parks, to coerce libraries, to open, and what the impact for those departments might be. We have not had any kind of conversation about whether a larger number of smaller facilities might be better than one single monolithic facility, and I think all of those things are things that the actual community response team grapples with on a regular basis. So I think the best option here is actually to let that community response process play out, come up with a plan, and generally the cold weather community response plan we've got right now, the biggest issue with it, to my understanding and talking with a number of advocates, is just keeping the barriers as low as possible. So I think if we were able to do that this winter, that's a huge win. If we were able to come up with a systemic process of doing it, that's also a huge win. I just wanted to present to this body that one of the most important announcements at last week's Metro Homelessness Commission meeting was that there is now a proposal on the table that our local continuum of care, which governs HUD funding and how it flows to local communities, there is a joint recommendation from that continuum of care as well as the Homelessness Commission to actually seek ways to become a blended governance body so that we actually, for the first time, really, since the Homelessness Commission was formed, have unified governance to try to tackle these things on a strategic basis for the long term. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this bill, as it is, should not go forward. It should either be deferred to be amended or should be considered not appropriate for this particular winter season, the work of the Community Cold Weather Response Team to go ahead as is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilor Weiner.
Thank you, Chair Vercher. I appreciate it. You know, having served on the Homelessness Commission myself, and after having an opportunity to have discussed this and heard from Ms. Tackett as well, I just have to say that I couldn't have said it any better than the way Councilman O'Connell just shared it. My concern is that this is insufficient. It doesn't meet the need. And if we're going to tackle this, which I think is a great idea, we need to tackle it comprehensively. And for that reason, I would urge the sponsor to either consider a deferral or some amendment that we can move this forward in a really comprehensive way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I don't want to speak for the sponsor, but I believe the intent is so that he can continue to work on the legislation. But I don't want to speak for the sponsor. Vice Chair Schulman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So there are groups working on this thing right now. the reason to push forward is like what I said. This is not a new issue. This didn't just show up because it's November. This issue was there last year. It was there the year before. It was there when I was served on the council many years ago. We just need to take action. Again, I tell you that on Friday, it looks like a low is 36. We're getting close to having very cold weather. This is not the type of thing that you just say, well, we're just not going to do it this year. We're going to do it next year. We can do better as a city, and we should be able to fund opening one of our metro buildings, working together to let people come inside. Last year, when I went out canvassing, I actually met the director of social services out at the East Community Center, and they let in over 100 people, and then the next night they let even more people in. So if we can't figure out a way right now, I mean, that's the beauty of this thing. It was supposed to be simple. I don't need policies. I don't need to worry about transportation or sanitation or showering or anything else. It was simply to open up one of our buildings when it's freezing outside to let people come inside. If we can't find it within our capacity to do that, then there's something wrong with our government. This should not be that difficult. I am willing to work with everybody, but I don't have any intent on waiting because it's getting cold outside. If I wait, we already deferred once, and that was 3 weeks ago. If I defer again, that's another 2 weeks, and then it's going to be in December, and that's another couple of weeks. It's time to go now. So I really would like to see it move forward. I'm happy to work with all the groups, all the advocates out there. They already are working on it. If they can come up with something, I'm good. But I don't want to hold, basically, I don't want to amend a bill or I don't want to simply defer because we're not ready yet. All this bill says is that we're going to open up a building when it's cold outside to let our citizens come inside so they don't freeze.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So the motion is to approve and re-refer back to Budget and Finance. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Show of hands, please.
We're going to need a show of hands. All in favor?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9, 4. Okay, all against?
Opposed?
2, 3, 4. 9 to 4. And wherever you were.
I'm for.
Okay, 10 to 4 passes.
And I think Erica's not voting. Erica didn't vote.
I know, she didn't vote.
Okay. Motion passes. BL 2017-942 sponsors Syracuse Veteran Air Rod, authorizes the acquisition of certain right-of-way easements, drainage easements, temporary construction easements for the purpose of the Fairway Drive sidewalk improvements. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Bill 2017-943 sponsors Van Rees Veteran Air Rod, authorizes the acquisition of certain right-of-way easements, drainage easements, temporary construction easements for purposes of the Maplewood Trace Sidewalk Project. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. BL 2017-944 sponsors Johnson Mina Veteran Air Rod, authorizes the acquisition of certain right-of-way easements, drainage easements, temporary construction easements for purposes of the Davidson Road Multi-Use Path Project. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Now we're back on our resolution. RS 2017-910 sponsors Sledge and Verture, authorizes the issuance of public facility revenue improvement bonds by the Sports Authority, authorizes certain revenues of Metro as security in an official statement to be distributed in connection with the sale of bonds. I believe we have a substitute. It's been moved and properly seconded. Councilman Mendez.
I'm not sure. about the right procedure, but I also would like to move Amendment M in our package.
We have a substitute. Do we want to introduce the substitute?
We're on the substitute.
Sorry, I was talking to Natalia.
Oh,
So
sorry.
Someone introduce the substitute. Someone has introduced the substitute. Somebody's right.
Yeah, Bob.
Okay, sorry. Did you
So-
move? Did you move the substitute?
I think I did move the
Yeah,
substitute.
it's been moved and
Sorry,
seconded.
just want to make sure. Perfect. We're
And,
good.
and now I'm moving, is it appropriate to move an amendment?
Yeah.
Move Amendment M and can provide an explanation.
Do you want to adopt the substitute first, and then we'll move the amendment?
Okay. Yep.
We are.
We are. So the substitute has been moved and properly seconded. All in favor? Opposed?
Show of hands.
Show of hands.
Point of order.
We're on the bill as substituted.
Okay, Chair Vercher, I'm just from a point of order perspective, I did raise my hand to inquire first. I think Council Lady Allen may have asked my question in part, but can you just walk us through, Mr. Jameson or Chair Lady Vercher, you know, we've got an amendments packet that we received at 3:45 today, 15 minutes before this committee meeting started. And so I'm just trying to understand, is the bill as substituted what we saw as of Friday? I mean, we do not have this in front of us other than what I can pull up online. So in what sequence will we move the bill as substituted, then address amendments independently? Or are we going to amend the substituted bill? If somebody could just speak to the kind of order or procedure that we're going to undertake here, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, so we're going to go through the substitute, and then we have the sponsors move their amendments appropriately. And then we'll adopt the amendments in that order as well.
Correct. The amendments packet was submitted this morning, I think shortly after 9 a.m. What you should have received at 3:45 was a technical correction to two other bills. One was a typo, and one was a parcel reference that was off. So that the substitute you got this morning in the amendments packet shortly after 9 a.m. is what is before you now and what has been moved for approval. All of the amendments has been proposed as amendments to the substitute. So procedurally, should this body adopt the substitute, you will then move on to the individual amendments that may or may not be offered.
Okay, so this committee has moved the substitute, but we have not voted
Correct.
Correct.
on the substitute. Thank you.
Council Lady Weiner, discussion on the substitute?
I have a litany of questions. Just for clarification, would you prefer that I ask those questions now, Mike, or wait until?
I'd adopt the substitute or take the vote on.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and take the vote on the substitute, and then we'll take the questions
Okay.
Afterwards.
Okay,
As
if
it
you'll put
relates
me
to
back in the
the
queue for that, that'd
substitute
be
and
great.
and the
That's
additional
great.
amendments.
Okay, thank you.
So now we're on the substitute.
Are there any questions?
Are there any questions regarding the substitute?
All right.
Councilman Mendez.
If I may, I think part of the issue I'm hearing is, and then after we get the amendments, we'll vote on the bill as substituted?
Correct.
Right.
As amended.
So I think I'm hearing some heartburn that we're not doing anything substantive by adopting the substitute now. It just opens the door for us to have a conversation about it, right?
Correct.
What do you want to do, just?
So if there's any further discussion on the substitute, if not, take the vote on the substitute.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on the substitute? Vice Chair Shulman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just following up with Councilman Mendez. All we're doing is getting the substitute in front of us.
Correct.
So that we can then take up the amendments and do it. I think there's also this question about, as we're going through the amendments, we'll be discussing them, but at some point we'll have the substitute as either amended or not amended, and then we'll have discussions about the whole thing as a package. So I think that's the format I assume that we're going to follow. So we're not just passing the substitute and then walking away. We're just getting it in front of us for purposes of discussing.
Right.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Any discussion on the substitute? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed?
One opposed. All right. Now on to amendments.
Now on to amendments. Councilman Mendez.
I'd like to move amendment M with a brief explanation.
The floor is yours.
Just want to make sure it was seconded. Okay. All right. So over the last few weeks, I've expressed a lot of reservations about the bill, and I want to thank the administration and the team for working with me. I think I might have had 20 comments when I started, and most of them, all but a few, have been included in the substitute that we got before us now. And then there's two more that I think are agreed upon by the administration and the team, and they're in Amendment M. And the two changes are to make sure that it's clear that stadium construction infrastructure, so the infrastructure related to the stadium, any overruns are included in the guarantee that the team is providing. And then the second one is that if there becomes a new lead investor and that lead investor does not provide an appropriate guarantee within a reasonable amount of time, then it'll end up being a breach under the lease. And so that's what M accomplishes, making it so the lack of a successor guarantee becomes a breach, and making sure that we've got stadium infrastructure overruns covered by the guarantee.
Any further discussion on Amendment M?
All in favor?
All in favor? Opposed? Amendment passes. Another amendment.
Any further amendments you might offer? Is there anyone that wants to introduce another amendment?
Are there any other introductions of amendments? Councilman Cooper.
Thank you, Chair Lady. While we're working our way through the amendments, I would like to offer Amendment H, which is a somewhat just a request for additional clarification that there be a staging and a demolition plan that comes before the council before this process gets too far along, since that's fundamental to the whole staging of the fairgrounds discussion. And so it's in your amendment package, amendment number H.
You move the amendment?
I would like to move the amendment.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Any discussion from committee members? Councilman Sledge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amendment H, while I appreciate the sponsors' work on this, I think it inadvertently ties the hands of the council and the team in some ways that I don't think we should be doing. In essence, it puts a 30-day window on the demo, and if we do end up passing it this week, we likely won't know until the second half, potentially, of December. So we're talking 5 to 6 weeks from now, and we're talking about creating an, quite frankly, unnecessarily short window on the demo, because we will not have been able to go through the kind of detailed plans that I think everybody on the council has indicated that they want to go through when it comes to demolition and construction of new buildings. So with that in mind, I would ask that the committee vote against this amendment so that we can have the appropriate amount of time when it comes to making sure we've got the plan that works for everyone, including this council.
Thank you, Councilman Sledge. Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing Council Lady Gilmore. I apologize, it's not working. Some of you up here.
Microphone either.
Council Lady Gilmore.
This is not working either. Can y'all?
You're on, it's just the volume.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to hear more from Councilmember Cooper as it relates to his Amendment H and his need for having it or introducing it.
Councilman Cooper.
Thank you, Council Lady. This is responsive to the charter referendum, that there be 27 votes for demolition at the fairgrounds. And I think that's a very serious concern. And so in order to have a demolition vote, you have to have a demolition plan. The charter requires 27 votes for that plan. That, in effect, respecting the voters' intention that before you get too far along in a process, that there is accurate and adequate discussion of what fairgrounds buildings come down. Does any of that change use at the fairgrounds? And what is the staging of the activities? Because both the activities are protected by the charter and the buildings are protected by 27 votes. And I think everyone agrees that we'll have that vote, have to have that vote. The question is, when do you have that vote? Do you have it at the end of the process or relatively towards the beginning of the process? And should that demolition plan not be responsive to the community's wishes, then you should go ahead and have that earlier. Now, the reality is the demolition plan is not that difficult to do. In fact, the bulk of it has already been done. Oh, sorry, it's already coming back on, the sound system. The bulk, if you take a tour with the director of the fairgrounds, she will point to every building that is now currently planned to come down. That's information that should be shared with the public.
Am I on? Okay, so yeah, I had a follow-up question. At this point, it sounds like it is required by charter, but there's a specific date. I heard Councilmember Sledge said it wouldn't give enough time. If the Attorney Jameson could just speak to what we're talking about when we talk about time frame. One said it would offer up less time to do the things we needed. I'm hearing one council member saying more.
It's an amendment to Section 7 of the resolution, which spells out various conditions that must occur before the Sports Authority can issue bonds. And this particular amendment would require, before the issuance of bonds, that there be a detailed staging and demolition plan, not the actual demolition, but just the plan for the demolition. And then there is a timeline on that of either 30 days after this council adopts the resolution or the end of the year, December 31st, whichever occurs first.
Thank you.
Council Lady Henderson.
Thank you, Chair Bircher. We have volume now. That's great.
We do.
I guess my question comes to Councilman Sledge. I can understand how 30 days might be somewhat constraining. Is the administration friendly to by year end? And can you speak to that from a timeline perspective? Because I appreciate the intent of this amendment and the spirit in which it is offered. And so I just didn't know if we could kind of speak to the constraint a little further that Councilman Sledge mentioned.
Councilman Sledge.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the councilman for her question. Year end is actually worse in a lot of ways because if we're able to be awarded a franchise, it will almost certainly be fewer than 30 days before the end of the year. And so we're talking about a very constricted time frame in which to have a public discussion and get some sort of plan down regarding what we're going to demo, where we're going to demo. And while I've had many of those same conversations with the Fair Board and the executive director, I think we want to ensure that we've got a timeline that is for once of our own making. I know a lot of members have mentioned, and I think accurately, that we've been on a timeline crunch, and it's one that has not been of our making. I don't see why we would now put an additional onus, quite frankly, on ourselves when we've got all of a sudden the time to make sure we get it right.
Any further questions, Council Lady Henderson?
Well, I guess my question comes in the amendment of Chair Elrod, and maybe, I mean, it's, I guess my feeling about Amendment H is somewhat related to some of the other amendments. So, Mr. Jameson, I don't know if you can speak to the amendment related to the SP zoning for the potential or not 10 acres and what structure we would have at that juncture to address the demolition, the plans, and so forth, and if that could be addressed in this context, or if, well, yes, I'll just leave it at that.
My understanding from an email submitted by Councilman Elrod earlier this afternoon is that he requests introduction only of his amendment Q. That amendment does include the SP zoning, but essentially what it provides is it redacts the inducements language in the whereas recital clause, recites the importance of the agreement for the development of the 10 acres nevertheless, with a nominal 99-year ground lease from Metro, subject to two things. Subject first to the approval of the Metro Council of that lease, and also conditioned upon the approval by this council of the site plan that would be part of an SP zoning ordinance.
Okay, so I guess that's where my question comes then, perhaps for sponsor Cooper, is can he maybe speak to the difference between having the site plan and addressing it in that way, and then I recognize the demolition concerns. Can he kind of speak to that in the context
Councilman Cooper.
Amendment Q?
Thank you. And Council Lady, if you would go over again exactly what your question is, I would be grateful.
I guess now that we have a microphone that has volume that works, maybe if you would perhaps just restate your position on Amendment H. I guess I see it having some overlaps with some of the aspects of Amendment Q as it relates to that site plan, but I know you're more specifically talking about the demolition plan.
Well, the H is to be responsive entirely to the charter, and regardless of zoning or rezoning in a separate plan, the charter is very specific, and I think it's awkwardly written enough. Why have a demolition plan cited in the charter, which is a little bit unusual, except I think that it speaks to the intent, which is that uses at the fairgrounds are protected and can only be changed by a referendum itself. And then like it or not, the buildings are very protected. And it's a little bit like endangered species. They are protected and have a higher standard. And so that we as a group, regardless of whether it's in an SP or a different flavor of zoning, in all cases, the buildings do have this special status, and it's a question of going ahead and getting this on the agenda so that it's not the last thing that this council does once it's appropriated the money, et cetera, sometime later next year that you have a charter protected vote. And that I think you just have to respect the will of the voters. And they fundamentally found that the demolition of the buildings was very important. And so we should treat it as very important and not as something that's difficult to do, or maybe we don't want to do it on this timetable. It's very important. It was a referendum item.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Council Lady Allen, will you seek in recognition on the amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as an engineer, I want to just kind of throw out the thought that when I see the word staging and demolition, to me that implies that there's a plan for where each use gets moved to before you demolish a building, and that may mean where some new building gets built to move that use to, and that seems like something that would be very difficult to do in a 30-day period if you haven't actually decided where new things are going on the site. It seems to me that if we want to be thoughtful and honor the wishes that uses continue and are even improved on the site, that we need to develop that in a thoughtful, master plan type of way and not throw something together to try to meet a 30-day deadline. And I would appreciate the importance of making sure that we are aware that that is something that will come before us. But I will also say this council has a precedence for stopping projects when we're not comfortable with them. I don't think that's something we need to be afraid of. We know that we have a vote that we will have to come up with three readings on an ordinance about demolishing the buildings. We know that's before us. And I don't know that having this bill changes that. It simply puts in a staging and demolition requirement in a very short amount of time that to me would be very difficult to do in a fashion that would be beneficial for us.
Thank you, Council Lady. Vice Chair Schulman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I am confused about 2 points, I guess, or I just want to clarify 2 points, and this may either be questions to Mr. Jamison or to Councilman Cooper. Amendment number H, a detailed staging and demolition plan is submitted to the Metropolitan Council within 30 days after the approval of this resolution or by December 31st, 2017. So it's a detailed staging and demolition plan. Could it be interpreted that this is just a plan? Could after you give it to us, if it's given to us, could it always be changed? And that maybe I ask the second question first. It doesn't say it's submitted to the Metropolitan Council. Is that inferring that we're going to have a vote on it, or is it just submitted to the council?
The amendment simply requires that it be submitted to the council. And in answer to your first or second question, yes, I would imagine that demolition plan could be changed after submission to the council. Okay, so and maybe I go to the Councilman Cooper. It looks like just on the basis of it, it's just a plan. It's just a detailed staging and demolition plan. And I understand that it may take a while, but obviously it's just an initial plan. It could always be changed. And it's submitted to the Metropolitan Council. It's not asking for a vote. That may be the intent of the councilman's amendment, but this language just says it's given to us. As long as it's given to us, as long as a detailed plan is given to us, then they can proceed.
Well, I agree, Councilman. You know, it is just a plan, and it's recognizing the requirements of the charter, and it goes to staging because uses are protected. And so I think you're given wide latitude to say that this use may not take place for 6 months, and then it'll take place over here on a temporary basis, and then it'll come to a new facility. But it addresses all of the questions raised by the referendum. What happens to the uses and what happens to the buildings. And again, it's very hard to get this far without this knowledge being there, and it just should be shared. It can be amended, but that we have no business getting this far into the fairgrounds without living up to these 2 requirements of the charter.
So, Madam Chair, just one more question for the councilman. Could you see based upon this amendment, could you see a detailed staging and demolition plan just being handed out to the members of the council? I know if I was trying to meet this, if this was a requirement, I would get you a plan. But then I would also, I guess, ask after I look at it and then after I study it for another 6 months, I may come back and say, you know what, we're going to have to change some of these things at some point.
I do. Construction in life often requires changes, but you've got to formally recognize your obligations. And equally, at some point, I think it is contemplated in the substitute itself that there will have to be 27 votes to approve the demolition plan. So let's get started and float what the demolition plan might look like, what's there, how does the staging take place. And again, 73% of the voters of Davidson County were specific as to this. And so my challenge to the body is, how do we live up to that? What's the right way to live up to that? And I appreciate you being clarifying that it's just a plan, you know. And how are we appropriating a large amount of money and having big plans without dealing with what's been given to us by the charter to follow?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Councilwoman Dow.
Thank you. Some of my questions have been answered already. I'm still a little bit confused about the, why wouldn't the charter amendment apply to this without this particular amendment? Like with regard to the 27 votes, like why would it not apply still?
Technically, it does. The charter specifically requires a vote of this council by 27 votes before demolition. It doesn't specifically speak to the submission of a staging and demolition plan within a certain number of days. But as is now incorporated within the substitute as a specific condition prior to bond issuance, there is a Metro Council approved adoption by 27 votes, approval of the demolition of fairgrounds premises.
Okay, so I guess if I'm understanding you correctly, it's just the plan that it's not the staging and the demolition plan that's not included with that. It's just, I don't have a problem with this bill. I think anyone that's doing any type of construction, you know, this is something they should have. We've had special meetings before when it comes to reviewing legislation that was urgent. The other thing is, I don't think we do have a precedent of stopping things. I've noticed since the 6 years I've served that I've seen historic buildings come down and we were not able to stop any of those. So I would say that no, we don't have a precedent of stopping things. I don't see where this is too cumbersome. It's a plan. And what I think it provides is some transparency to those people who are very much, and that, like you said, the 73% of voters who turned out and said that they're interested in protecting the uses there. It gives them some assurance about the spaces that they have, where these spaces can be, you know, if their, you know, shelter is demolished, what the plan B is. It gives them transparency about what is planned to be demolished. And I think I would like to have that as well. So I'm going to support you, Councilman Cooper. And thank you.
Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Chair. Well, there's no way to say this without giving a great amount of sarcasm. All we're really asking to do is to get warning. Correct me if I'm wrong, Councilman Cooper. You're just merely asking for a timeline. And, you know, I don't think it's outside of our perimeter to actually put a timeline to say, give us information. Again, sarcasm, whatever you want to call it, I don't think anybody would expect anything different from me at this point, simply because this is a complicated issue. We are delving into waters that I'm not certain that we can do or can't do. I don't have enough information, so I'm going to support it also. Again, it's just asking for 30 days. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Pulley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question, I have a couple of questions here for Metro Legal, Mr. Cooper, if you don't mind. Are we in violation of the charter if we don't pass this amendment in any way?
No, sir.
So we're still required to have the 27 votes to demolish the property?
Right. If you recall, some months ago, an ordinance was submitted to the council to demolish some of the dilapidated structures at the fairgrounds, and along with that came a plan for what the improvements were to be. Similar type ordinance would be submitted at the time all of those decisions have been made.
Does this amendment marry us if we were to come up with a plan for buildings to be demolished? Does it marry us to those buildings, or can we make changes beyond that?
Well, whatever plan is submitted to the council would not, that would not be binding.
Be binding anyway. Another question I would have is, under this amendment, just in the interest of vetting any unintended consequences, what specific authority is then given to the mayor's office to demolish property at the fairgrounds if this amendment's passed?
None.
Okay. And could I get someone from the administration to just speak to whether or not this would have any kind of negative impact on this thing moving forward?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of the cart before the horse. I mean, I think we've been very transparent in laying out all of the conditions that have to be met before this project moves forward, even with even should we be successful tomorrow night. You know, I mean, one of the confusing things here will be we would have to submit a plan if this would be approved tomorrow night prior to probably even knowing whether the MLS franchise has been awarded. And so obviously if the franchise is awarded, then the plans for the fairgrounds are very different than if the franchise isn't awarded. Now, I don't have any substantive problem in submitting a plan of that's requested in here well in advance. The deadlines I might have a little bit of a problem with, but it is our clear intent to give the council all of the information it'll need well in advance of when it's going to be asked to act on the conditions that are all laid out in the resolution. I mean, if you go back to look at the substitute resolution, all you're doing tonight is basically sending a message and saying you're going to, you know, the Sports Authority can go forward with financing the stadium for soccer subject to all these conditions, including getting the MLS franchise, getting the council to approve by 27 votes, the demolition of certain buildings, the approval of the zoning for the development. So there's a number of conditions that have to be met, all of which would have to be submitted to the council well in advance of before they're being asked for any action. But if the council's will is they get a plan sooner, we'll obviously do that, knowing that it's subject to some change as we go forward. So I think the bill is a little bit premature, but if that's what the council desires, clearly we'll comply.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have nothing further.
Councilman Mendez.
Thank you. I was just going to make the point that this is a concern that I had, and some of the suggestions that I made were incorporated in the substitute, and it's in section 7I and J, where the substitute specifically requires the ordinance with 27 votes from the council authorizing the demolition, and that the Fair Board also approve the demolition of any structures. And so I think at this point, other people have made the point, but I was just going to point out that it is a legitimate concern to make sure we honor the 73% that voted for the charter amendment, and that was the point behind sections 7I and J being added, to make sure that there was an express condition of getting that approval prior to the bonds being issued. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Pridemore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Along with what a colleague had just mentioned, it doesn't change anything of what the requirements, what the people have asked us to do. Those remain the same. However, in the amendment he was talking about, it made me think about, well, what if it has to go before the Fair Board? I mean, why is it 30 days? That's one of my questions, is why should it be 30 days? Because we're going to be expediting a lot of things. We're going to be jumping in and rushing things when there's going to be other entities that's going to be reviewed, that we'll have to review and approve also. So 30 days, or the deadline of December 31st. I mean, I don't know why that is important, considering that we still have to have 27 votes. So no matter what we do, we're going to have those 27 votes. So 30 days with other entities being involved in the process doesn't seem like that's a lot of time. And also, say for instance, we do have one is submitted for review either through the Fair Board or and then eventually gets to the council within that 30 days. And during that time frame, there has been some revisions. You know, there's not many plans, I know, construction plans that aren't revised. So what happens then? What is that procedure? Does it begin again another 30 days, or the process be amended? You know, there's all kinds of questions there. I don't believe it's necessary to even have those questions be involved in this process, because, again, at the end of the day, we still have to have 27 votes by this body. So the difference of putting a deadline on it when you have other entities involved in it making those same decisions, and then again when we have revisions, I just see that it's going to put a rush not only on the design people, but also on the council and the entire body. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Sledge.
No, I'm fine. Thank you, Chair.
Councilman Cooper.
Thank you. And I think Councilman Pridemore really speaks to some of the concerns here, and I would just say back to him that this is really just a plan. It is making public what I believe is already assumed, and so I think it's useful to have that out in the public space, what is already assumed. And then, as he pointed out, the vote comes when the vote comes, but it's going to be useful in the public sphere to know what really is assumed to be going on at the fairgrounds. And so it's just adding an informational requirement, if you will, for that in a plan that really doesn't have to be approved by anybody, not until the vote on demolition comes, but it's beginning the public engagement on what really is going to happen in the fairgrounds. And I know there's a lot of questions out there. There's a lot of concern, but all of his points are well taken. I do think that this tries to navigate the issues that have been raised by the charter for us.
Any further discussion on Amendment H? Councilman Sledge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to reiterate something that was stated. This is in the substitute. The 27 is in the substitute. It's honored within the charter. And not only that, I think maybe I articulated this poorly the first time. We could very well tack this on, pass the resolution, and then start the clock. And we wouldn't even know if we had a team. And we would be submitting demolition plans for a property that has been very important in the public dialogue in 30 days. And so I think that we're unnecessarily handcuffing ourselves if we do that. And I would just reiterate my desire to the committee to please vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any more discussion on Amendment H? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, I need a show of hands. All in favor? Opposed? Raise them high. Okay, 5 to 8, Amendment H fails. What's the next amendment? Are there any other amendments to be offered? Didn't you already have one? Vice Chair Shulman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just referring back to Mr. Jameson. Did Councilman Elrod want to, did he have an amendment he wanted to bring to the table? Hugh? So, he's not here? Well, I'm not a sponsor of the amendment. I just feel bad that he's not here.
Sponsor the amendment. The amendment's in the packet. Any member can offer any amendment they see in the packet.
Well, so maybe out of, well, I have no idea what it says, so maybe out of decency to the councilman, maybe we should just bring it up and discuss it. But since he's not here, then we can talk bad things about him. All right.
It names the stadium after you. I don't know if you understand.
Oh, it names the stadium after me. Well, then.
Amendment Q, it resembles Amendment O almost.
Identically. It takes out the inducement whereas that listed the 10 acres as an inducement for the team, but then goes on to recite the importance of an agreement for the development of the 10 acres with a nominal 99-year ground lease from Metro, not a no-cost ground year, 99-year ground lease, but a nominal 99-year ground lease, subject to 2 conditions, subject to the approval of the Metro Council and also conditioned upon the approval of this council of the site plan that would be submitted as part of the SP zoning designation. The only concern with Q is that it amends only the recitals, not the body of it, but that was Councilman Elrod's request.
Vice Chair, are you going to Offer Amendment Q.
Not me. Just want to know what it did. I would ask, maybe it's appropriate to ask the sponsor of the measure, Councilman Sledge, just for a brief response on it, if he doesn't mind.
Councilman Sledge.
Sure. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Vice Chair. Yes, to my understanding, Amendment Q is the result of Councilman Elrod's, I think, dedicated work. He's actually out of town and has been, I think, working very diligently on this amendment to ensure that we as a body have a significant oversight regarding, in addition to everything that's afforded us where we would be approving the zoning, but to have a significant oversight on what would be proposed on the development. To that end, I fully view Amendment Q as a friendly amendment and would like for someone to offer it.
Vice Chair Schulman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Then I would move the amendment.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on Amendment Q? Seeing none, all in favor? Go one moment. Council Lady Henderson. Discussion on Amendment Q.
Yes. Mr. Jameson, can you define a nominal 99-year ground lease?
I cannot. I don't know what is meant by nominal.
Can somebody look it up in Webster's?
I don't know what it means in the context of going from a no-cost lease to a nominal lease. I don't know what that price would be.
Well, I'd like for us to know that before we vote on this, please. I'll look it up on my phone, but that's just come to my attention as we move this amendment, so.
The amendment only revises the recitals. It's not in the body of the resolution, so I'm not suggesting that it has no effect, but it has no alteration to the body of the resolution, just the recitals.
So if we don't define nominal, I guess we are speaking to the fact that we want it to be more than zero, but it could be like $1.
Correct.
But could it also be, I mean, is $1 million nominal in the context of $11 million of land value, or I
think it's all relative.
So the definition of nominal is titular, existing in name only, not real or substantial, connected with the transaction or proceeding in name only, not in interest.
Thank you, Council Lady. Council Lady Allen.
Thank you. I'll speak to that briefly, and then I actually am trying to make another amendment, so I'm going to raise my hand again. Mr. Jameson, can you explain to us whether there are other things in the substitute that do address what the lease might be that are more specific than in the recitals?
The lease would come back to the council for approval. So at some point, presumably, whatever that nominal figure is defined and specified, and you would have a chance to weigh in on it when the lease is brought back to this body.
So the IPA agreement doesn't specify any specific amount there?
No.
And then in the substitute, I thought I remembered something about 50% of property taxes would be dedicated to the fairgrounds for capital expenses, but that's not considered part of the lease necessarily.
Correct.
Okay. So that simply just leaves some flexibility, perhaps, above no rent.
Right, 50% of the property tax revenues.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to punch my button, but I'm going to raise it again later after we finish.
Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Jameson, all right, please repeat what you just said. So this amendment virtually has no effect on anything?
It simply revises the 9th recital clause, the whereas clause. It's not within the body of the text of the resolution.
Okay. So I'm going to take the nominal piece also. So if we charged $1 for the lease, but we raised it to $2, that'd be absorbent, wouldn't it? That'd be extreme. So I bring that up because if it really doesn't do anything, what's the purpose of it? Zach.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Sledge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm going to try to address what was brought up. I think without trying to speak fully for the sponsor, it seems like there was some importance and some weight given to the fact that we want to reassure this is a complicated issue that's going to require subsequent votes regarding parts of this proposal, that we wanted to be extremely clear as a body what our jurisdiction, oversight, and intent is. And so while I totally acknowledge what Mr. Jameson's saying regarding the whereas clause, I think what the sponsor was indicating was that he wanted to ensure that those who saw this as we did it knew that there was an amount of oversight that goes beyond a single vote. And to that end, I can't speak to any further to what the sponsor of the amendment was looking for, but it did seem that it was something that satisfied what he was looking for.
Any further discussion on Amendment Q? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Amendment passes. Are there any other amendments to be offered? Council Lady Allen.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I would like to offer Amendment I and ask my neighbor here to explain specifically what he hopes to accomplish with that.
Councilman O'Connell.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to my colleague from District 18 here. This one is basically an amendment that, as we have had this long-running conversation since all of us took office about kind of our approach to labor and workforce development here in Nashville and ensuring that we are creating as many good jobs for Nashvillians as possible. This one, I hope, is actually maybe even gives us a pathway to a new standard for transparency for Metro dollars flowing from public projects directly to workers through the folks that are developing these projects. So right now you kind of have to request certified payrolls from contractors after the fact. This gives us a proactive approach that will actually kind of help Nashville come up to the standard of other major cities with real certified payrolls. So this will give council and the Sports Authority, as well as Metro Finance, a new perspective in the number of jobs and wages created by the project. As I understand it, and I believe Metro Finance can speak to this, I think the administration is supportive of this amendment, and I would encourage my colleagues to support it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Cooper.
Thank you. I certainly support Amendment I. And but while I have the floor, let me ask a quick question, both to Chairman, to you, and to the Mike Jamieson. On these amendments, all of these are coming up to the floor tomorrow night, even though everything that's in the package. It doesn't have to be voted on in this committee to come to the floor tomorrow night.
Amendments that are not approved by this committee or even considered by this committee can be offered on the floor tomorrow.
So tomorrow night we will formally be going through A through Q.
The Vice Mayor has a different style, but typically it would be an amendment that is offered by a sponsor, presumably. But he may go A through Q straight down the list.
And so in any of these amendments that the sponsor is no longer sponsoring, that's still on the docket tomorrow night?
The amendment, by virtue of the fact that it's in the packet, is anyone can offer it. It's not held captive by the sponsor of the amendment per se.
Both in the committee and on the floor tomorrow?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Davis.
Just want to quickly say 100% support this, and anytime we can get transparency and info on our jobs that we have in construction, I support. And it's tucking in right before I've got this bigger transparency thing going on as far as ECD bills coming up. So thank you, Councilmember O'Connell, and please support this amendment.
Thank you, Councilman Davis. Councilman Sledge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As indicated before, this is a friendly amendment, and I'd ask my colleagues to support it.
Council Lady Allen. Is there any other discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Amendment passes. Is there any other amendments to be offered? Councilman Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Chairlady. Even though the sponsor has withdrawn sponsoring A, I think it's gotten a lot of attention, and I think, pursuant to your comments, it is appropriate to have a committee vote on that before it reaches the floor tomorrow night, successful or not, that any amendment that comes to the floor should have a committee vetting and discussion to it. And so I would like to sponsor Amendment A, even though Councilman Elrod has withdrawn that. It is in the amendment package.
Do we have a second? Any discussion? Council Lady Henderson.
No, thank you, Chair Vercher. I'm sorry. I had clicked that earlier.
On the amendment? Councilman Sledge, before I recognize you, Mr. Jameson, can you just brief the committee on this particular amendment?
Amendment A would redact the references in the 9th recital clause to the 10 acres for private development and substitute in lieu thereof a recital that says no additional inducements are necessary. It would then amend Section 8 of the substitute by deleting entirely the reference to the 1/2 of the property taxes from that private development eventually being appropriated to the reserve account for capital expenditures. In other words, Amendment A eliminates the reference to the 10-acre private development.
Thank you, Mr. Jameson. Councilman Sledge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Regarding the issue of Amendment A, I know this is one that's been pretty well discussed publicly and amongst ourselves. I think as folks hopefully have seen in the last few days, this is part of the proposal, and it's not a trivial part. It's pretty integral. The reasons for looking at this development, I believe MLS President Abbott sent a letter last week indicating that when MLS is looking for a proposal, they are looking to ensure that there is something that's going to support the stadium itself that's around it, that there is a sort of economic engine that is created to ensure in part that they are protected, but to ensure in part that the city making the bid is protected as well. I think it's already been mentioned tonight that the substitute and that the agreement has been that half of the revenues from this proposed development, which once again would come back to the council for 3 readings and a public hearing later on, half of the revenues generated from that would go to the Fair Board, which would be then be able to use that as they saw fit for the general uses of the fairgrounds. Just as a reminder, the annual budget for the fairgrounds right now is about $3.5 million. This could be a pretty essential source of revenue for the fairgrounds. And so I would indicate that if we're able to continue to create this economic engine that benefits not just the area around it, but the fairgrounds property itself, it's something that's very much worth pursuing, and I'd ask my colleagues to vote no on Amendment A.
Thank you, Councilman. Any discussion, any further discussion on the amendment? Council Lady Henderson.
Thank you, Chair Vercher. I guess it is sort of a point of order question to which Mr. Jameson has already somewhat spoken to, but because Amendment Q is now potentially in conflict with Amendment A, could you speak to that? I mean, the committee is just recommending approval, yay or nay, as to the amendments, but to Councilman Cooper's question, they'll all be, anything that the committee has addressed will also be addressed at council. So, I mean, I guess I wonder sometimes as we address these amendments, sometimes they're addressed as they're offered, sometimes they're addressed alphabetically, and sometimes the way in which we discuss these, you know, because some of them are written assuming that one passes or one doesn't pass, or just, you know, the kind of the sequencing of how we do that. Can you speak to if this committee were to make a vote on A and we were considering both A and Q, in what way we would address that on Tuesday?
Sure. what happened earlier today and over the weekend, there were some indications by sponsors that they may not want to offer their amendments. So rather than go straight down the line, we are inviting the sponsors of the amendments or others to submit them. To the extent two self-contradicting amendments are offered, well, what the council office would do before tomorrow night is make sure that is clear at the beginning of the amendments recitals at the general meeting tomorrow night to make sure the council understands that it's got to be an either or one of the amendments could be tweaked on the floor to remove the contradiction.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And then Chair Vercher, could I also ask Councilman Mendez related to his amendments? He did that with a brief explanation. So Councilman Mendez, you offered Amendment M, but you are withdrawing which amendments?
Councilman Mendez.
And so doing that. And why you're withdrawing them, because do you feel those things have been addressed? I know they were somewhat redundant to each other, but can you speak to that? I guess I'm asking that question because the position I take on A, I think is kind of related to
Sure.
how and if we're, thank you.
I mean, the reality is that the administration and the team were negotiating with me over that language over the weekend. K and L were submitted basically on yesterday's information. M was based on today's information, so M is being pursued. Mr. Jameson was kind enough to put them all in case, not being sure what would happen. So I'm not pursuing K and L. I don't think it's a matter of them being withdrawn. I'm just not offering them, and M is the one that I am pursuing.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Pridemore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Considering we're discussing an amendment of the sponsor who's not here, who also has enlightened us through electronic communication that he wishes to withdraw this, I'd like to move for a indefinite deferral on this amendment due to the fact the sponsor wanted to withdraw it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Cooper.
Lady. And I appreciate the councilman's very good point about this. And the discussion on A, if you didn't mind, everybody, bear with me for a second. It was to get further information on 4 points. That since A will be introduced tomorrow night, because it's in the amendment packet or has the ability to do that, to go ahead and have a focused discussion for this committee for the benefit of the group. And to that end, if I would like to go ahead and move down some of the just 4 questions, and I see our wonderful finance director right here. Question I've gotten from the public on the lease is how are taxes paid if Metro continues to own the property? Is there a payment in lieu of taxes? Oh.
You speaking to the motion on the floor, Councilman?
Right. Well, the motion on the floor is I would love to have a discussion before we get to tomorrow night, since discussion on the floor is relatively difficult. And the discussion, this committee is set up to have a discussion on these matters and questions raised and answered. And I think the councilman makes a great point. I think we're in a bit of a gray area. If you have A coming up on the floor tomorrow night, then let's go ahead and have a discussion for the committee so that we can have an informed body tomorrow.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Davis, discussion on the indefinite deferral.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I pretty much was kind of saying the same thing Councilmember Pridemore said. With Councilman Elrod sort of abandoning this amendment, I think he was abandoning it because it was sort of a torpedo anyway. So the 10 acres is part of the deal. We get to do the zoning. I think that's a very important piece when that comes back up, and I'll be looking for affordable housing and that sort of matters in the zoning. So, yeah, I think we should just indefinitely defer. That's a great motion. Thanks.
Council Lady Henderson.
I guess I have a point of order question. I mean, if Councilman Cooper advanced Amendment A and then somebody or offered Amendment A and somebody seconded that, weren't we not discussing Amendment A before the indefinite deferral was offered? Can somebody speak to that? I mean, that just seems...
Robert's Rules of Order will tell you that a deferral motion is appropriate at any time, even in the face of an advancing motion.
Okay, thank you for reminding me, Mr. Jameson. I guess I would support Chair Cooper in discussing this. I think we all know that from the community standpoint, the 10 acres are a matter of much consternation and misunderstanding, and folks want clarity on it. So I concur that, you know, discussing this amendment, because it speaks to that particularly, would give us the opportunity without, to Mr. Davis's point, it's, you know, discussing it here is, it's not a torpedo. It, in fact, gives us the opportunity to have that discussion in the public view, and to ask some questions about it. So I would ask that, because we are in committee, in the Budget and Finance Committee, that we not defer a discussion about the financial aspect of this deal. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Lady. Councilman Prodmore, discussion on indefinite deferral.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Discussing an amendment that is properly brought on the floor, yes, but one that's also been transmitted electronically to all members of the Budget and Finance Committee, that the sponsor, the one that submitted the bill or the amendment, chooses and wishes not to move forward with it. You know, if another council member, another member of this body would like to have that discussed, then, you know, they could submit an amendment to that. But I'm just going by the rules. I mean, he is not here. The sponsor is not here. And he has requested that it be, his intentions are to withdraw it. And I'm just obliging by his intentions. And we're tend to be wasting, I don't want to say valuable time, but time on this topic, because it is an important topic, but we can discuss it tomorrow. It's not limited to just tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Davis.
Yeah, just also, we can discuss the 10 acres and everything else when we get right before we vote on the full bill as amended is what we can also discuss, like everything then. So, you know, just for this committee, I just meant about this amendment in particular. We could still discuss whatever when we get the bill as we're amending it.
Thank you, Councilman. Any further discussion on the indefinite deferral? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? We're going to need show of hands. All in favor, raise them high.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Opposed?
Where are you? Definite deferral, 9 to 4.
Amendment is indefinitely deferred.
9 to 5.
9 to 5. 15.
Any other amendments? Any other amendments?
Is there any other amendments to be offered? Councilman Glover.
Mr. Jameson, if you would clarify for me, because I get kind of muddy in the water on this. Since we have indefinitely deferred that amendment, does it even have the opportunity now to come up on the floor tomorrow because we deferred it in committee?
Yes, it does.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Is there any other amendments to be offered? Councilman Davis.
Thank you, Madam President. Attorney Jameson, sir.
Yes, sir.
Just for some clarification for some of the folks that may be watching on Channel 3. Now, there will be a vote requiring 27 which we can further add amendments to regarding the 10 acres and the affordable housing. Is that correct?
There will be a required vote and 27 vote passage for the eventual demolition of the fairgrounds. That ordinance presumably is subject to amendment.
Gotcha. And tonight we are, and tomorrow night we'll be voting on basically the bonds, right?
Correct.
And also we'll be voting on the lease agreement, correct, in a future date?
At a future date, but not tomorrow night.
But not tomorrow night. And I know you don't have a crystal ball, okay? So that vote can happen as soon as December or sometime next year?
I would assume early next year, given that their administration will wait on the MLS board's decision, which I understand only to be sometime in mid-December.
And just for the record, for those back at home, any amendment that was withdrawn or not offered tonight, depending if it does not pertain to the bonds, could that amendment be brought back when there's the vote for the 27 that's needed?
Sure.
No problem. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Are there any other amendments to be offered?
All right, so you're now on the substitute.
Seeing none, now we're on the substitute as amended. Any discussion? Councilman Leonardo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that we've seen that that the Predators did a great job when they came to Nashville of growing the sport in certain areas of town, and I just wanted to confirm with, and I think maybe Mr. Riebling is the correct one to answer this question, that when it comes to a practice facility, and I know it's not all up to the administration, but I just wanted to make sure and confirm that the sites that we had talked about in Bordeaux and the County Hospital Road area would definitely be at the top of the short list to be considered for a practice facility.
Councilman, thank you. As we talked about before, I can assure you it'll be on the list that we'll take a hard look at. There's a lot of factors that'll have to go into it, but that will be one of the sites that we show and suggest they take a hard look at. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Cooper.
Thank you, Chair Lady. And again, I appreciate everybody and the indefinite deferral on A. I totally understand it, and we can just shift these questions over to the substitute. My first question for the Director of Finance, it's been raised several times by people in the real estate community to me, is how are taxes going to be paid on the 10 acres? Since it's Metro is the landowner, and then this is a lease. Is this a pilot? Okay.
No, it's not a pilot. I might ask Councilman, or Legal Director Cooper to chime in if I say anything wrong, but there'll be a tax on the leasehold interest. So if they build a $100 million building on the land, they'll be taxed on the $100 million building. So it's just like any other property. There just won't be any value on the land, or they may impute some value. It'll be up to the assessor whether they impute the leasehold as the long-term leasehold interest as having any value. But they'll pay taxes just like every other property in town would.
Thank you. So there's no tax on the value of the fairgrounds property, the real estate itself, which gets to my second question.
Well, that would depend on the assessor. She may decide that because it's such a long-term lease, that's equivalent to ownership and may assess some value to it.
Okay, thank you. The second question, and again, so to provide some clarity for the public discussion, is was there a site-specific appraisal for the 10 acres? There was an appraisal for the 28 acres, but the site plan ends up having only the 10 acres really developed and the rest of it by and large for parking. And then also there's a material amount of infrastructure spending, much of which would be on the 10 acres. Is there an appraisal, specific appraisal for this site plan?
The appraisal was for the footprint of the entire property. It was not necessarily just tied into a portion of the fairgrounds property.
Okay. So if a lot of that value ended up on the 10 acres, so to speak, of the $31 million valuation of the 28 acres, and in effect, the 10 acres carried most of the value of the overall site because most of the building is there, then it wouldn't be inappropriate to view the 10 acres as worth maybe more than $20 million, which is not formally taxed.
No, I don't think you can draw that kind of a conclusion from
Okay,
the appraisal.
you're unwilling to allocate the value, and there's been no professional process of allocating the value on this plan?
No, not
okay.
yet.
All right. Another quick question. I appreciate everybody's forbearance. Dr. Kessler, who I talked to working for Dr. Fox on the economic impact study, there's been a lot of discussion about the model for Major League Soccer requires the 10 acres. The 10 acres are required for the model. Dr. Kessler found that 63.2 million, really greater than 63.2 million, of direct stadium revenues coming from the team, from the sale of tickets and concessions. Now that's a large number coming from the economic impact study. Has there ever been any discussion of the model about what more would be needed? I mean, clearly the 63.2 million in direct stadium revenues is not enough. What is enough?
I don't think that they looked at that. I mean, I don't want to draw a conclusion around what their analysis might say in that regard.
Well, I agree. Zach kindly put me in contact with Dr. Kessler, who's a wonderful man, and I asked for the assumptions behind the model, which have never been provided. But on page 4, it's 63.2 million of direct stadium revenue.
I think that they do have a section in there which outlines the assumptions used.
Not sent to me.
Well, we can get that to you.
Okay, all of the assumptions on the 63.2 million?
We can get you whatever we have available to us.
Okay, but you see my question is what additional is needed for the model since, now would you be willing to share the model also?
Yeah, the study does not belong to Metro.
Right, so that would be no.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
We're not in a position to provide that.
That would be no. And then the final question, just clarity for public discussion, on the guarantee language. John Cooper, always loves saying this, was kind enough to share with me that the actual specific guarantee language has not been finished. That there, as you were saying, the ownership group isn't finalized and the guarantee agreement would take a lot of work. So it is correct to say that just has not been written yet, the formal guarantee language. So there is no formal guarantee language that has been written.
The substitute resolution as amended sets the framework for the guarantee, but the actual guarantee has not been drafted, correct?
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate clarification on all 4 points.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilor Henderson.
Thank you, Chair Vercher. My question was for the administration as well around some of the assumptions in the revenue model. And so, I mean, I think perhaps this is something that has been shared with us, but I was not able to find it. Just the understanding that there will be $13 million, right, in debt service annually for Metro, with the ownership group paying a committed $9 million towards that 13. Can you address the assumptions in filling that $4 million gap? Because when I just do kind of back of envelope type stuff, assuming 27,000 seats at a certain cost, and I mean, I don't see that in the early years as filling that gap of $4 million. And so my understanding is Metro is on the hook for that. And can you just address the revenue projections for that gap?
Sure, Council Lady, if I may. The way that the deal is structured is that for the first 5 years, the Metro commitment is if the sales tax and seat tax revenues are not equal to 4 million, Metro would make up the difference. In years 5 through 10, if the shortfall is less than 3 million, the Metro will make up the difference. And so what working with the team, we developed a base case and an optimistic case study. In the base case, there would be a shortfall in the first 5 years of the 4 million, to the tune of some, what is it, about $1.5 million ish, round numbers. I'll send you over the full 5, not a year, but in total over the first 5 years. And then in years 6 through 10, all the assumptions are this can be well in excess of the $3 million threshold. So I would say, based on these assumptions, and this is assuming not just ticket sales, but you got to have merchandise, concessions, all of which are laid out. The estimates are laid out. There's going to be other events besides the soccer events. Those are all built into these numbers that give us some a high level of comfort that the worst case, I hate to ever say worst case, but that a reasonable assumption is that Metro might be out some $1 million, $1.5 million in that first 5 years. In an optimistic, every ticket, a lot of attendance is really high. They get a lot of other events. We could actually have no exposure during any of the years.
Okay, so the base case scenario then assumes that after the award of the franchise during construction, you wouldn't really be in the new venue, and that's why you're just anticipating shortfalls, or would that be because...
This would be the first year of the stadium operation. You'd have the shortfalls. You would capitalize interest during the construction period. So in other words, you would fund interest into the bond issue. So nobody's out anything, so to speak, in the first, until the project comes online. And then in the first year, for example, in the base case, there could be a shortfall of about $500,000 between we think about $3.5 million from the sales tax and the ticket tax. In the optimistic case, it'd be slightly above $4 million.
I guess I'm just wondering, why was the deal not structured on the least or the less optimistic or the base case? I mean, why is the ownership group just not willing to cover that, frankly? I mean, just as far as the scenario and the assumptions.
Yeah. I mean, every deal has negotiating points. And I think this one is unlike other transactions that the city has done, this one is much more in the city's favor in that it greatly limits any exposure. I think that any deal has a level of negotiating, and that's the way this deal was negotiated. In an ideal world, we would have, we wouldn't be issuing, it'd all be on the private team to do it. I get that, but in the world we live in, to get this team built, it's going to take a public-private partnership with the emphasis on private, and that's what we think we put together for the city.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Council Lady. Councilman Pulley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to clarify a couple things with Mr. Reedman, if I could, about my understanding of the deal structure. Now, this is the $225 million is revenue bonds, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Can you explain to us just exactly what that means?
Right. Basically, there's two kinds of bonds, general obligation bonds and revenue bonds. And revenue bonds are designed for projects that have revenue. And general obligation bonds are for really non-revenue producing kinds of projects, streets, roads, schools, things of that nature, in which the full faith and credit of the government is pledged behind that. So all the other sports facilities are structured with, well, there are some general obligation bonds part of it, but primarily like First Tennessee Park is done as a revenue bond structure, very similar to this, where you take a stream of revenues which are used to pay the debt service on the bonds. And here it's the team lease payment, the seat tax, and the ticket tax, specifically.
So they're essentially tied to the revenue produced by this facility?
Yes, sir.
All right. And the team is locked into 30 years of this debt service, although it's unlikely should they fold up and go somewhere in the highly unlikely event that happens. Can you explain to us how they would be continued to be tied to that 30-year debt service?
The guarantees, I mean, they have an obligation to make that payment.
Okay. And their payment's $9 million, and the $4 million is going to come from the revenue sources you just articulated.
Their obligation is whatever is left after the sales tax collection and the ticket tax collection following year 10. Yeah. So, I mean, if you know, you can imagine as with inflation, the ticket prices are going to go up, the sales tax amounts are going to go up. So that number is not a flat $9 million, but it's the net less after you take those two into consideration.
And in addition to that, they're paying, what about, is it $150 million for their franchise fee?
It's my understanding that the franchise fee is $150
million. And $25 million in cash thrown into the deal?
That's correct.
All right. And so I want to address the 10 acres just briefly. Do you believe that to be designed to be a revenue generator for them?
Yes, I think it will generate some revenue for the overall team, but the feeling was that was part of the negotiations because they were taking on so much of the obligation of the debt. They were looking for another revenue stream to help cost, because not only do they have to pay the debt, they also have to operate, they also have the obligation to operate the team, so they have to pay the salaries of the team and all the operations of the team. They have all the requirements, the ongoing maintenance, the year-to-year maintenance of the stadium, all the, electric bills, light bills, cleanup bills, water bills, all that's their responsibility as well. And so, we envisioned, the deal started very differently than where it ended up. If you go into these transactions, it started with a request for a much larger commitment on the part of the city than I felt we were comfortable with, or what I felt the council could get comfortable with. And so, as part of the negotiations, we agreed that on the 10 acres, because it also provides the benefit of helping to redevelop that site, which we think is important, while not impacting any of the uses that are currently on that site, and will be additive and incrementally make the overall fairgrounds really a better place, which is what the goal is behind this.
All right. Now, when the MLS examines them and us for a potential franchise, I'm sure they look thoroughly at the finances to ensure that the ownership can meet their obligations. Do you view this 10-acre parcel as part of the equation they will be looking at when they review the responsible part of their financing?
I think clearly, sir, I think they will from the perspective of the overall financing, the financial strength of the team. Are they, the league wants to make sure this is a successful venture as well, and they want to make sure that there's not an overburden on the team to be successful. So they will look at it from the overall revenue projections, as well as, frankly, you go to the fairgrounds today and it needs some work. This administration recognized that several years ago by starting the process by putting some money into the capital budget to start the renovations of the fairgrounds, and this will only enhance that, and the private development piece will further do that by bringing some uses that will be complementary to the normal everyday fairground operations in addition to the stadium.
Is this parcel currently on our property tax rolls?
No, sir. No.
Will it be when it's developed?
The development will be on the tax rolls, yes, sir. And
Okay.
potentially the land, as we talked about earlier with Councilman Cooper's questions.
And so there will be some tangible benefit to the city out of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's safe to say that, you can assume a development level. We don't know exactly what's going to go on there yet, but it's not inconceivable that the property tax revenue generated from this development would be in excess of $1 million on an annual basis.
And will the fairgrounds receive any of that money?
Yes, sir. The agreement we have is that the fairgrounds would receive half of the half of the property tax that's generated from this 10 acres.
And I understand, maybe this is a question for the Fair Board, but I understand they're operating in the black currently. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
Okay. I have no further questions. Thank you.
But with a lot of deferred maintenance on the site.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Mendez.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, wasn't paying attention there. So I said earlier that if my two amendments get included, that I would vote for this. But I want to make sure to say at this point, when we're talking about the whole package, there were some I think, issues that are worth pointing out, just so the public has a clear-headed view of what's going on. Councilman Pulley asked about what happens if the team moves, and definitely if the team moves, it stays obligated on the lease. But one risk that we take on by passing this is that if the league folds, there is likely to not be any source of revenue to pay the lease. I think on balance, I think the administration and team would say that that's a fair risk for us to take, but we should be clear that we are bearing the risk. Metro is bearing the risk of the league failing. Also on the guarantee, I think we should be clear-headed about the fact that there are no individual human beings that are standing behind the lease here. There are no individual guarantors. What happens with one of the amendments we added to M, with Amendment M, is that if there's a successor owner, a new lead investor, that ownership team will have to provide actual guarantees from actual human beings. But for now, there is no individual standing behind it, and I don't think we're going to have that. And so that's something we need to know going in. And I am one of the people that have expressed heartburn about the 10 acres, and I don't want to belabor the points, but all the arguments that are being made today are not arguments that we heard in August when this was first presented, or even really when it first came to us on October 2nd. The idea of it being essential and integral are things that we've heard more recently. On balance, I feel like the team and the administration have dealt with me in good faith and helped get amendments that significantly improve the guarantee language to give Metro a hard cap in writing of not spending more than $225 million on the stadium cost, making sure that the infrastructure overruns, if any, are covered by a guarantee, and a bunch of other changes that are in the substitute. So I want to make sure that the public is aware of the things that could be criticized about the deal. My sense is, on balance, that we should go ahead with it. And thanks for indulging my comments, Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilor Gilmore.
Thank you. I had two questions. One is the part of the portion of the money that goes back to the fairgrounds. It only goes back for, it's my understanding, it goes back for the, I was talking and now I'm a little bit discombobulated, but it only goes back for the actual capital improvements. Is that correct? So my question would be, how much capital improvements would one need over the years? I mean, would there be a surplus, or could you just speak to that, please?
They've got a master plan that has been created for that property, so there are lots of needs at that location.
So has there been a dollar value assigned to it?
There has been, but I don't have that in front of me.
Okay, I think that would be helpful as well.
You have any more questions, Councilor Gilmore? Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Chair. So, Mr. Curl, I asked you to pull some numbers today because I think it's important for us to actually look at the entire deal. While the estimates are, the projections are, the whereases that might be blah, 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 at the end of the day, we still have a $4 million hook that's out there on us as far as the city's concerned. Now, I think we all agree that we hope that we don't have to reach into that. We don't have to spend that money, but we're on the hook for that. That clearly is written in the deal. Is that correct, Mr. Jameson?
That's correct.
Okay. And so when I asked Mr. Curl to pull numbers for me today, and I'll ask him just to confirm this, one of the things, if I may expand upon what Councilman Mendez just said, was we don't have any personal guarantees. No tax returns have been given. There is not a situation here where they're asking us to provide a mortgage but there's really not language that says there's somebody who's guaranteeing the payments here. It says the team will. I mean, reading the substitute, it looks like, yeah, team will. But I don't know what that means. What I do know is that when a bond resolution is written and it's done, at the end of the day, if something folds on that side, the people who give the bond will depend upon the city of Nashville to pay it, one way or another. And so I don't know if we really have the language there. And here's where I wanted to ask Mr. Curl, because here's where I get concerned. Over the last few years, Mr. Curl, I think we've seen phenomenal growth, have we not, with our property tax increase?
In looking back at the period from fiscal 16 through the current year, the total property taxes that we had showed $888.5 million in 16, going to $962.8 this year. Just in the last year between fiscal 17 and 18, that's an increase of $46.377 million.
Right. In that same period of time, how much did we use out of our rainy day fund to operate the city?
We've had appropriations from the fund balance in each of those 3 years. In fiscal 16, there was $73.87 million. In fiscal 17, that dropped actually, went down to $71.9 million. And the value for this year was a $75.249 million. So an increase between fiscal 17 and 18 of $3.3 million net between GSD and USD.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, what we've done over the last few years when we've had an economy that's just been roaring in Nashville is we pulled money out of our savings account to operate the city in excess of $220 million. So when I look at the numbers and we start talking about guarantees and we start looking at the other aspects of this, and I realize everybody's sitting over the table shaking their hands going, no, no, that's not exactly how it works, but that is how it works. We did take that money out of the reserve funds, and we did spend that money in operating the city. So I get concerned when we're going to, quote, put our taxpayers on the hook when I'm not certain that we really have a golden parachute, as it were, to protect the taxpayers. I haven't seen the language. If everybody else is good with it, I guess we'll just go ahead and pass this and move on. But I don't think that we have had the questions answered sufficiently. And so therefore, you know, I've had enough people in my district reach out and say, you know, gosh, we don't have streets, we don't have this, we don't have that. We don't have the day-to-day, just fundamentals, the infrastructure that we need. And so, you know, I'm not going to vote for this, which doesn't shock anybody. But at the end of, you know, as I said, at the end of the day, what I'm most concerned with is we're not really keeping our eye on the bottom line on, you know, we're spending $4 million here, a potential $4 million here. Maybe we won't, maybe we will. It's certainly written in the substitute ordinance that it would be $20 million in the first 5 years we'd be on the hook for, and then $15 million for years 6 through 10. So that's one part. The final point that I'll make, I have never been able to make the math work on this, that it's a 90-10 deal. Never. 90% would be 90% private funding, privately done, and 10% would be government funding. And the $225 million revenue bond is the city of Nashville saying we're taking the mortgage out for this. So with that, Chair, thank you for indulging me.
Thank you so much, Councilman. Council Lady Dow. Council Lady Dow.
I didn't know my mic was on.
Oh. Councilman Schulman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to focus on two areas, and I had sent these questions to lawyer John Cooper, and he was really nice to respond over the weekend, but I just want to clarify. One has to do with the parking funds. In the substitute resolution, in section 7D3, talks about the team shall be entitled to all revenues generated at the stadium, including ticket sales, seat licenses, concessions, naming rights, fees, rent for use of the stadium, and parking throughout the duration of the team lease. So I know that the fairgrounds for their events also charges parking. I guess the question would be, do we feel it's sufficiently clear to make sure that we don't run into situations where they're fighting over the parking revenues?
If it is parking for a fairgrounds event, then they would keep the revenue for parking on their property. For stadium events, the team would get the parking revenue.
Okay, so let me ask you this hypothetical question. Let's say that there's an event at the stadium, and for some reason there's also an event at the fairgrounds, and people park in either new parking lots or they park in parking lots. How do they figure that one out?
I don't know at this point. I mean, there's language that for scheduling events, they would have to work together in good faith, and I would think that parking is something that could be worked out as part of those discussions.
I saw that Mr. Riebling looks like he's going to tell me something.
I'm not sure I can add anything to that. I think that's, you know, some of those things will be spelled out. It may be probably a little clearer in the operating lease and the team lease as we go forward on that. But the whole idea is that clearly the fairground, you know, we're going to schedule appropriately so that you don't double dip on events. You're not going to have a race operation the same day as a soccer match, you know, or you're not going to have a soccer match during the flea market weekend. So with good scheduling, you can minimize that. But if there is a double event, then we'll have to have some accommodation for that. And I think that's a great question that we'll have to we can spell out, you know, clearly once we sit down with the fairgrounds and the team and negotiate the actual lease with the stadium.
So I guess what I'd say, and I understand that, I understand the other part about trying to schedule at different times, but I think that those fees are obviously important to the fairgrounds. Based upon what I understand, they use that.
Right, but also remember that if this is approved, they're getting, you know, maybe $500,000 or more in new property, you know, property tax money coming to them, which they don't have currently. So plus all the other improvements to their buildings and things like that. So it's a win for the fairgrounds, in my opinion.
Well, but I don't want to deny them getting their fees. And I can see a situation where people are pulling in and you have to start asking them what they're here for. And I just want to make sure that we are very cognizant of the fact that that's important revenue for them. The one other last thing was, as I was looking through the intergovernmental project agreement, this is in, it's in section, I believe, must be in 3E. Looking at this right, yeah, in the main part of the document, it's on page 11. And Mr. Cooper had sent me some information. The surplus revenue fund. And I'm not sure, I looked through the document, I read it, I'm not sure if I had seen that before. Is that some type of, is that a unique fund? And then I guess, Mr. Riebling, this may be for you. How does that work? And what monies go in there, and when does it maybe help go pay for some of the obligations?
Can I defer to our bond counsel, Mr. Oldham? Is he still here? Thank you. Sorry, I can't.
He is. Come on.
Hi, I'm Jeff Oldham, Bass, Berry & Sims. The surplus fund would be a fund created by the bond trust indenture. I think every sports stadium bond deal, revenue bond deal that's been done has an indenture. Surplus fund is something you create at the bottom of the flow of revenues of every indenture to be a place that catches anything extra that might come. And so that's just sort of a standard reference to if there happens to be anything in that catch-all fund, what could it be used for? One of the things it could be used for, if there's anything over there, would be reimbursement to Metro for having come out of pocket previously for non-tax revenues. That's what that's intended. That's the reference there.
So is it clear, would it be clear that if anything does end up with this surplus revenue fund, it goes to reimburse Metro?
Yes.
So it can be used for other things. That's what it's used for.
Yes.
And one last question. When you say it's kind of at the bottom and the money just falls in there, what is it? What falls into this thing? Is it
Yeah,
I guess I understand that we're pulling taxes and other things out of it, but what is that?
If the sales tax rebate exceeded the debt service payments, then you would have extra money that you didn't anticipate, then that would flow down into the surplus revenue fund. That's likely not ever going to have any money in it, but it's a catch-all is a way to reimburse Metro should they ever have to come out of pocket to make good on a year debt service, which that's what with the backup pledge of the city is designed to do, but it's never been called upon on any of the other transactions we've done. It's simply there for the marketability of the bonds. But if in fact we ever did have to come out of pocket, and revenues finally came in better than anticipated, they would flow down and Metro would be reimbursed.
Okay, all right. So our other deals have that same thing. Okay, all right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Councilman Leonardo.
Thank you, Chair. I guess this question is probably for lawyer John Cooper, but in Section 7 of the agreement and back to the guarantees, it just says that a guarantee by the team that's acceptable to the MLS and unconditionally guaranteeing. Well, I mean, you know that you could go down to Secretary of State, you could be a corporation overnight, and then I want to use that as surety, but it has no value. So what steps are we taking to know that the surety that's on this actually has value? Because I just don't know. It's page 5, section H at the first line, and talking about the guarantee by the team. And I guess the question is, how do we know that we have a sufficient surety on the hook as far as value? Because it's not Major League Soccer guaranteeing it. It's just simply a brand new team.
Yeah, so let me make sure I'm following you. You're saying that are you talking about for the initial guarantee or a successor guarantee?
No, the initial guarantee, correct.
Okay, the initial guarantee will be the team. The controlling owner is John Ingram. He is the majority controlling owner currently. As was pointed out, there is not a personal guarantee, but given Mr. Ingram's commitment to the community and the Ingram family's contributions, we felt comfortable that he's good for it.
But any successor, if we had to get to that point, hopefully we don't. But. Correct.
Yeah, successor guarantee under Councilman Mendez's amendment would have to provide the adequate assurance that the personal guarantee is there to ensure it was paid.
All right, thanks.
Councilman Mendez.
At the risk of adding on to Legal Director Cooper's answer, the entity that provides a team guarantee will also own a franchise and be entitled to a share of profits from Major League Soccer and selling merchandise and concessions and a whole bunch of parking. Part of the reason why I can't get comfortable with the idea of the owner is going to make it right on an unwritten obligation. The thing that gets me comfortable is that so long as the league is in existence, the team is going to have enough revenue sources to get there, and that's why I got comfortable with it. Still the risk is what if the entire league fails, and what has got me to the finish line on that is, okay, if the league fails, will there be a successor league somewhere in the United States for soccer? Will there be a women's professional league? I'm not sure it would be a complete total loss. Yes, we're bearing the risk of that, but I do think it's relatively low probability.
Thank you, Councilman. Council Lady Henderson.
Thank you, Chair Vercher. I had a question about parking as it relates to the plus or minus 10 acres and the capacity for parking at present. And with Councilman Schulman was addressing kind of parking revenue. Do you anticipate that you will have structured parking as part of the development of the 10 acres for the benefit of whatever is developed there, but also likewise, there's not sufficient surface parking now if 27,500 people, recognizing they're not coming in 27,000 cars, but how have you kind of thought through that from the revenue perspective, but also just spatially? how and where that's going to be?
First of all, I would say that, there is more parking per seat in this facility than there is at First Tennessee Park, at Bridgestone Arena, and some of the other places. So there's, give or take, something like 5,000 spaces that would be available on the site even after all this development occurs. So there are a number of spaces on this site. I think as it relates specifically to the 10 acres, that's a work in progress, and I don't know how it's going to be laid out, but obviously they can't do an SP zoning unless they have sufficient parking for their needs and meet the requirements going forward. I believe Councilman Sledge will insist upon that as they go forward. So I don't know the answer to the parking on the 10 acres today, but recognize that has to come to the council when you approve the zoning and all that, and so those details will have to be worked out by that time. It's still not yet clear, they don't know exactly what's going to go on those 10 acres. That's kind of a work in progress over the next several months before they submit the zoning application.
I guess my question comes in, though, so there's 5,000 surface parking spaces just on asphalt and grass and gravel and whatever on site now.
If you would look at I don't know if you recall, when we sent out the site plan that included where the stadium would be and where the 10 acres are, you may not have noticed it, but there's also a legend on there that shows in each of the areas how many parking spaces would be available post this development, and I don't have my math in front of me, but give or take, it's at least 5,000, I believe.
Okay, and that's without compromising the intent to fund, as we already discussed, soccer fields, park space, a greenway.
Right. No, all that would remain open. I mean, the soccer fields are being designed for parking, so they're going to be multi-purposed because, again, they need it for flea market purposes. Again, getting back to scheduling issues that similar to what Councilman Schulman asked. When there's a flea market, they're not going to be able to have soccer games there, even youth soccer games, because the fairgrounds needs all the facilities for that. So, yeah, I don't see any compromise. I mean, there's 5,000 spaces, give or take, for 27,000 seats, which is, far better than most of the other venues we have in town. Probably as good or comparable to Nissan Stadium.
Well, right. I mean, there's the parking lot that the Nissan Stadium sits in, and then there's all the ancillary parking and parking garages and
control all of that on game days. And I don't know the exact number, but I'm guessing it's probably around 10,000, which for a 70,000 seat stadium, and here it's 5,000 for 27,000 seats.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is the parking matter can be additionally addressed through the SP zoning as it relates to the redevelopment.
To 10 acres. Yes,
okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council Lady. Council Lady Gilmore.
I think we're addressing it, but I just want to be clear, how do we determine which one has precedent between the fairground events and the soccer events?
I think what the agreements call for is that the parties work together to cooperate. I mean, that's not unusual. I mean, every venue has requests for dates. Bridgestone has the hockey games, and they have concert requests and all the other events, and it's simply a matter of working together. The soccer schedules, we know when the flea markets are. They're always the third weekend. Help me out. I just can't remember. Last weekend of the month, so we know what those are already. And so you would clearly not schedule soccer games and other events to compete with that. Again, remember, soccer is only 17, 18, 19 games a year, and season stretches from March to October. So there are a number of free dates, so as to not conflict with the needs of the fairgrounds. I mean, that's just something the parties can and will have a good relationship and work out.
Thank you, Council Lady. Councilman Davis.
Thank you, Madam.
You're not on the committee, so let's be brief. Okay.
I was being patient. Some of my caucus members who are on the committee have expressed a disapproval of the DBE of this project, but also, this can also be addressed when we're coming up with the 27, the next vote on this and dealing with the lease. Is that correct, Mr. Jameson?
Is your question whether or not the minority participation rate, if that's sufficient, if that can be added as an amendment to the 27 vote ordinance? Yeah, it'd be a little off topic, but yeah, it could be added.
Well, I don't, but, we've gotten commitments, and also, it's no shun on the mayor's office, but we've gotten some commitments in writing from the stadium. And I just want to be clear, because I want to go over that with the caucus, with some of the stuff they have in mind. I've spoke to the representatives, and that's a very important part of this, because in order for the caucus to feel comfortable with this with the next round of voting on this, we need to be comfortable with that DBA agreement and DBE agreement. But more importantly, overall, there's some DBE issues in Metro as a whole, which the mayor's office is wanting to address also, but we're definitely addressing too as a caucus. So, once again, I am going to vote for this stadium, but, as the minority chairman, I have to let the people at home and let my caucus members know that their concerns are being addressed, and also just letting people know there's probably going to be a bit of a hard line on this second round of voting in 27. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Seeing no further discussion on the substitute as amended. Seeing no further discussion on the substitute as amended, Vice Chair. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. We need a show of hands. Let's raise them high. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9, 4. Opposed? Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. 10 to 4 passes. 10 to 4. Resolution passes. Committee members, hold on. We have one more item of business that we need to address that wasn't on the agenda earlier. Thank you for being so patient. BL 2017-939, sponsors Mendez, Virtue, and others, amends the Metro Code to add a new section regarding approval of transit improvement programs. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you so much. This adjourns our Budget and Finance Committee meeting.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.